Alright, so what we have here is a sample, guys, of the problem that I kind of asked you on the first exam, part 2. A local college would like to illustrate how attendance affects grade point averages. Assume that the data given is a sample of the population of attendance of the freshman class during the semester. So what we're doing is we're looking at 30 students in the freshman class. Now obviously the freshman class is a lot larger than that, but we decided to take a look at only these 30. Okay, so assume that the values calculated below the 70th percentile receive an F. So I'm going to change a couple things. We're not going to really make one table because it's really difficult to fit everything onto the Word document at the end. So we're going to actually end up producing probably 3 tables just to make everything fit nicely. Now remember the asterisks? That means that you do have to make sure that you copy or insert the table into the Word document. Okay, so if it's one table, great, put it in, but it's going to look kind of smudged together. So you'll have to print all documents and spreadsheets as well as email them to me. Now, what we want to do is set up a frequency distribution. We have a whole bunch of stuff with the frequency to do. We got to get the range, the sample, the mode, the 70th percentile, the sample variance, and the sample standard deviation. So I've already gone ahead and set up a first table. So this table 1.1, days of attendance, is simply these numbers here for the data, okay, all in ordered form, so lowest to highest. And you can see that that's exactly what I did. Starts with the lowest value, ends with the highest value. I made a separate section here of the same information just to help us out with the processor finding the distribution. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy these over. Just put them right here for right now. That's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is change this font back to Arial because that's what we were using. And do it this way. Okay, so right here what I want to do is call it the frequency. Okay. Let me just make this a little longer here so it doesn't bunch up like that. And that's what I'm talking about with the Word document. Word will expressively just, crunch everything down. It really doesn't look that great. So frequency. And now we can change the part here. Okay. So I'm just going to start making my columns just a little bit wider here for a second because I know what's going to come up. So the attendance we want here is just the actual attendance that you see here, except that it's going to be shortened a bit because there's copies or the numbers are frequently shown. Okay, so we have 2 5s. So the first attendance would be 5 and the frequency would be 2. Now I'm not going to do that with all of them this way. I'm going to work downwards. So I'll do one more. So if you look at the 6 here, there's the 6 days. Then they also have a frequency of 2 because 1, 2. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy down to 10 and place them in here. Because again, I want Excel to work for us and not be a pain. So the next number that we have to put in is 11. The next one is 12, 15, 17, 20, 22, 23, and 35. Now, as you can see now that we have our 10 situations here where we have all the attendances labeled, and now all we have to do is go and count the frequencies. So I see 111, so I'll put 1 there. And you can do the same. I'm just going to be able to count them and look. So 3, then we have 3, then we have 1, and then we have 4 and 2. Okay, so right now we have the basics of our table outlined. Alright, so now we have to identify the classes. So that becomes an easy process when we start to actually look at it. Um, all we have to do is set up a small little equation, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set this up. I'm going to keep this right here for now, but I'm also going to take this and make another thing directly of this, okay? Now, you know what? Let's just do it this way, because it'll be a little bit easier to follow, I think. So at this point, what we want to do is name the classes. So classes, and we're going to need a k value here to help us out, but let's just put the formula in so you can see how I'm getting it. It's 2 raised to the kth power has got to be greater than or equal to the total attendance. And I'll just put total here, but we're going to look at the total frequency of the attendance. So what I want now to do just quickly is make the total. I'm going to do an auto sum. Now remember, yours might have to go to oops. Okay, so I just did something kind of quick and silly. Okay, so now all we want to do is, you might have to go to data first if you're using the newer version. I'm using my older version only because it's nicer and I have everything where I want. So I'm just going to click in auto sum, and you can see that it in fact did it. The nicer way to do this is to leave that here, click auto sum, and then it looks like it shows up here, and there you go. You have 30. So we want the k value to produce a base 2, something that's greater than 30. So what we're going to do is, to make our lives a lot easier, is I'm just going to actually use what I have here to help us out. So this becomes very easy. I'm just going to hit equal to 2 caret, which is shift 6, and I'm just going to click on the 1 here, because it's a nice number to go up from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Why create another column if we don't need it? Okay. So now I should be able to drag him all the way down, and you can clearly see that we get really large numbers very quickly. Okay, but this identified a very important piece that we want. Do you see how 32 is greater than 30? So this right here is what we're going to actually end up using to produce the number of classes. And how many classes would that be? It would be 5 classes. Because remember our formula. How do we get this? We took the exact equation here, and we wanted it to be bigger than the total of the frequency. So at 5, if we have 5 classes, we definitely have larger than 30, which is what we're saying here. So now that we know the classes, we're going to start putting up the class width. So this becomes very easy to do. We're going to say that, okay, well, how do we figure it out? Well, we said we need 5 classes. Well, luckily there's 10 things here, so that makes it kind of easy to figure out, because I have 1 set of 2, 2 set of 2, 3 set of 2, 4 set of 2, and 5 set of 2. So you can see right here we have our 5 classes. Now, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm just going to end up putting and formatting these to text, only because I don't want the numbers to be confused in Excel. Sometimes they'll put in dates for you and all of this silly stuff. So later on we might have to change a couple cells wherever we end up placing this table. Okay, so now we have the set of 1 to 2, which is what we said. We'll take these 2, and then the next one will take these 2. So the next one is 3 to 4, 5 to 6, you got it, 7 to 8, and 9 to 10. Okay, now we just place in the attendance as it appears. So what do we want? Well, the attendance here is going to be the sum of these guys right here for this. For each class, you're just going to do the same thing and add them together. So what we're going to end up doing here is just putting 11 for the first one. You going to see it? 11. Then it's going to be 23. Then it's going to be this right here, because we're wanting to keep everything together, okay? So obviously there's going to be some information that's actually lost here, which is fine, okay? But this gives us a showing of what we're going to have. So that's 32. And 7 to 8, we have 20 and 22. That's 42. And then we have 23 and 35, which is obviously going to give you 58. Okay. So ideally we don't really need these anymore at all, but I'm putting them in only because I want a reference of what we're going to be doing, because this, like I said, we're not going to really use this at all, but we are going to use it as a basis for how we look at the frequency. So just like we did with attendance, and like I said, we're going to delete this in a moment, okay? But to get our frequencies, all we have to do is do the same thing that we did here. So I'll be back when you guys get that. Alright, so hopefully you caught up with me, and what we're doing is I just added all those up and I got rid of the attendance. I just wanted to use that to show you about what we're actually going to be doing with the frequencies. So we're just adding up these numbers, those numbers, and those numbers. So you should come up with 4, 3, 13, 4, and 6. Now we're finally ready to actually put together our relative frequency. And I'll shorten that up just a bit here, just so we keep it nice and tight. So now we want the cumulative relative frequency to go here. I'll make that super wide for a second. Okay. So with these other pieces, then we finally finished our table on the frequency distribution and make some interesting parts of that. So obviously what we need now is we also need the total, just as we did before. So we want to be able to capture all of the frequencies. So I'm just going to go up here and do an auto sum, hit enter. Now this is very easy. All we have to do is take the part out of the whole, the part out of the whole, and I hope you see that this number is going to end up being fixed, which means that all I have to do is take this number and I want it to, you know what, let's just make it easy. We'll divide by 30, the total that we have here. Okay, so enter. Now I'm going to just drag this all the way down to 30 so you can see that it's 1, and I'm going to format the cells to have a decimal place of 3, which is the thousandths. So makes it a little bit easier to put together. Okay, so, and you can see that 100% of data shows that we have here. Okay, so cumulative relative frequency is going to be our most interesting one to show. So what we have to do is just hit equal. We're going to pick the very first cell and hit enter. Now all that's doing is copying it, because I keep wanting to add the next in the sequence to the total, the next in the sequence to the total, the next one in the sequence to the total, next one, and so on and so on. So what we have to do here is simply type in this, we're going to type in that, plus this, hit enter, and now we can drag it all the way down to our 10, which will indicate 100% is done between 1 through 10 individuals that were sampled. Okay, so this right here is actually going to become our secondary chart that we want. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to move this stuff over. We really don't need it, but I'm going to keep it here for a second anyway. And I'm going to move this over, even though we technically really don't need this now anyway, but I'm going to move it just out of the way. Okay, and now we're going to put this and move it closer to our data that we're currently working with. Okay, so there we go. In fact, you know what we'll do is because these all look nasty now, we'll condense all these down. I'm just doing this to make it look kind of nice and even. Is it necessary? Not really, but I like to have things a little bit neat. So even if it's not perfect, we'll do it that way. And that way, that allows us to move this table up here. Right up one more. And there we go. Now we can change these settings to what we want and be able to make it look, you know, relatively nice without destroying the other table too much. So I'm just going to make sure that these are a little bit close together. Okay, so now we're just going to call this table 1.2. And we could put in more information like relative and cumulative frequencies, but I think that's fine for right now. Okay. Now that we have that, we're pretty much done with a lot of this information. Okay? But we are going to need some of this data that we already previously made, which is over here. This part of the data is still usable to this point. So we're going to actually end up using that to create the rest of our information. So as far as we're concerned, we can finally get rid of this. And we're going to end up making the other table, you know, right next to this one. But the only thing that I really want to take are the total number of students and the attendance. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this and I'm just going to move it over here. Because that way we don't affect the way that the tables above us work or function. So we want them to kind of carry out the same look. So right now, don't care about this, delete it. Don't care about that, delete it. So now we're going to work on the other aspects that we need. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to need to do at this point is find the range, and the sample I'm going to save for a little bit. Okay? I'm not going to do that one first because I know that I'm going to need this with the variance and the standard deviation. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to calculate the range and the 70th percentile. So here we go. Let's type in attendance range. Okay, and I'm just going to carry this out over here. So the range is just your uppermost, biggest value minus the smallest value, and that's all it is. So all I'm going to do now is type in a formula that says I want this minus that, and range is done. Okay, now we want to do mode. Well, the mode is kind of nice and easy in this case because I made it that there were so many of the same number. Okay, and you can clearly see back here, if you really want to look, that 15 shows up the most. Okay, so all we need to do is just simply type in mode 15. Okay, so I'm just going to make that a little smaller just so I can keep everything nicely together. Alright, so now the 70th percentile. And I'm also going to add the value for the 70th percentile. Okay. So there we go. We have all of these put in place and we're ready to really do it. Well, how do we calculate the 70th percentile? Well, that's easy. You're just looking at 70% of the data. So you have 70% of the number of selections that you have. Well, notice how many that we have. We have 10. So I just multiply it by 10 and that'll calculate this wonderful variance. Okay, sorry, the percentile. So now it just means that I have an integer value, which means I'm going to have to do some averaging. So the actual value for this is going to be averaged between the 7th and 8th. If this was a decimal, leave it, you'd be fine. But what we want is the average of this right here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go here, type in equal, and you know what? Let's make it even easier. Let's go over here to the auto sum, and you'll notice that what we have here is a little drop down menu. So if you go to the right a little bit, you see that arrow pointing down, and we're going to pick this right here. Boom. Now it'll give us the wrong coordinates here. What we want is between the 20 and the 22. So we can take the average of those, and boom, there we go. It's 21. Okay? That'll help us discover something later on, okay? Which I hope you're kind of seeing right now. So, okay. So now we've calculated this all out. We have everything we pretty much need to work with, because we set up the range, we set up the mode and the 70th percentile. Now I'm going to combine the means to help us calculate out the variance and the standard deviation. So unfortunately, Excel doesn't allow me to really work with X-bar too much, so I unfortunately have to calculate out the mean and do that. Once we calculate out the mean, we're going to have to do something interesting here. So I'm just going to calculate the mean out right now. Well, that's the average of all of them, right? So can we use our little trick that we just did before? I hope so. So let's do that. Let's go over here because we want Excel to work for us. So average, and we don't want that, right? We don't want that. That's not going to help us. So what we want is the average of all of these, and hit enter. And it will give us our mean value. So that's kind of nice how it worked out. Now what we want to do is, in order to figure out the actual variance, we have to subtract all of our ith terms or attendances from the mean. Well, the mean from that. So what we're going to say here is, remember we did this in class, it was x to the I minus n. This time I can't type in, x bar, so I'll just type in mean. So what we're going to end up doing here is going to have to fix this number, but all of these numbers right here are the ones that we want to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is type in equal. I'm going to go to 5, and then I'm going to hit subtract the mean right here. But because of the way this is, I can type in just 16.6, but I kind of want to use the formula to work for us, so I don't have to type it in, constantly or drag it and drop. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be $x, $3. And we'll fix that position right there. And now what happens is if I go all the way down to the 10th column, the 10th student, we now have all of the numbers listed. And you can see that what we're doing is we're just taking that and dividing it by that. That and dividing it by that. Okay, now I'm going to copy this again and paste it, but this time what we're going to want to do is tack on that wonderful caret, which is just the exponent. So shift 6, and then we want to show that we're squaring it. Okay. Now when we do that, I'm just going to end up making this just a little bit wider, just so we can see. We'll take that value, shift 6, and 2. So we square it, and then we're going to drag it all the way down. And here we're going to need the sum. So I'm going to make a total here and do the sum for this, because now we know the total. And this is very important because now all we have to do to calculate the sample variance is to simply take that number and divide it by the number of what? What would you say? It's got to be the number of, come on, you guys got it. Say it, say it. Number of, oh, come on, say it, say it, say it, say it, say it, say it, say it. Okay, well, let's have some fun with that. So it's just that. So let's just put it in here first. So sample variance, and I'll move that over, and we're going to also do the sample standard deviation. Okay, and we'll make this just a little bit wider there so we have everything. All right, now the thing is that we're not going to have one for all of them. We're just going to have one done. So if you look at in your book and you find the sample variance, or you look on the slideshow and find sample variance, you'll find that it's the total of this minus 1 from the total of the count. So that's easy. You just have to copy this and then divide it by 9. And there we go. We're done. Okay. I'm going to format these two cells so that they both have decimal place of 3 or the thousandths. Okay. And the standard deviation for this is going to end up being just the square root of that, which is why I was already ahead of myself, which I have to take the SQRT, and all I want is this number. And the reason why we wanted it positive, because it assures that we're going to have a positive answer. And remember, the standard deviation is also plus or minus, right? Positive or minus. Okay. So when we do that, we now have the standard deviation, which is great. Okay. Now we're really done. Okay, the only thing that now we have to do is just type in table 1.3, and we'll just call it sample variation and standard deviation. Okay. So now that we're actually done with all of this, so now that we're done with all of this, now all we have to do is go into the Word documentation and copy these. Now I think these will fit a little nicer than just having one table. It just doesn't work. It doesn't fit very nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it look, well, you know what, I will make it look a little nicer. And I'm just going to format this. I won't do it with all of them. You should, or if you want, go right ahead and do it. So I want to format the cells, and I like borders around things, so I want the outline to be done for sure. And then I want this to have a base on the bottom. Okay. So see how much nicer that looks? Looks a lot nicer. Okay. So with that, you could do it with the other ones. I'm just going to do it with this one. I showed you how to do it. If you think I went too fast, just go back and rewatch it or pause it at the time that I'm doing it. So now I just want to copy all of this to the Word. So when you do this part, you should type in your name. You should type in the day that it's been handed in. And then what I'd like you to end up doing is putting in part 2 of exam 1 and foundations of statistics, or stats. So now you can just put in your first table and you'll see that it comes up a little nicer. Now I'm a little bit worried about the other table that's a little bit longer, but we'll test it out. And if there is something that we can do, we can still change a couple things. If need be, we can also insert another table from Excel, but I'm hoping that that doesn't come to it. Okay, so the next table that we wanted, okay, was this guy right here. So I'm just going to copy all this and paste it right there. You can see how nice it appears. Okay. Now this is the one I'm a bit worried about, because see how this one is 1, 2, 3, 4. This one was 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it might have a bit of an issue, but we'll get to that in the time. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it here. Now see what I was meaning about this? Well, let's see if we can do something about this first. So I'm going to delete this, and what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to just create a table that has one beast in it, and I'm going to want to paste this in the nested table. And even though it looks a little bit odd and it's not as nice, which I was telling you it probably wouldn't, then we can use this. And it's not the best way to characterize data by any means, but it'll do the trick for what we want to do right now, because this is not a process of looking at this in oh, hey, that looks like it's working just a little bit. So it only goes out to a certain distance, but hey, it looks a little better, just a bit. Okay, so if you see that little thing, you can just drag it out as far to the left as you possibly can, like this, and it won't go anymore because it whoops, I wonder if I can select the whole table. This would be kind of neat to try. Nah, didn't do what we wanted. Okay, so this is acceptable. Even though it's not truly nice looking, we'll still use it. Okay, so I'm just going to do some minor cleanups here and do that. Then the next thing that you want to do, and see that way I can see everything that you've done, and in the Excel spreadsheet I can see what you've done. Alright, so that way I can, you know, just check, like, oh, there's a formula, oh, okay, I got that, you know, oh, I got that, okay. Alright, so the last thing is your short paragraph. So what you really want to do is describe if there is a relation so that's the real question that you want to ask, and you have to use this information in order to get it. There are some interesting points to just point out, that the less than 80% showed up from all of these days. Okay, so that'll help you with a part of it, because what I'm specifically referring to is the 70th percentile. So that value is 21 here, and that means that anybody that was in class less than 21 days generally receives an F. Okay, so with that, I'm going to shut off and let you do your work. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to change this so that it's actually due the day that we come back to class, which is not Monday, it's Tuesday. So I'll give you one extra day in order to put this stuff together. And if you change a couple things around, it might make it look nice. Okay. So without dragging this on any longer, because it's pretty long already, I'll let you guys go and get to work. And have a nice rest of the weekend, and have a great Monday. Bye.